Hi, hätten wir uns vorbereiten müssen?
Ja, offenbar. Na, ich bin heute generell ein bisschen durcheinander, weil es ist ja gleichzeitig die Money 2020.
Stimmt, ja.
Und
Ja, okay.
ich habe jetzt, glaube ich, mittlerweile 4 Plattformen offen. Und als ich vorhin gesprochen habe, hat mein Computer beschlossen, er muss jetzt neue Treiber installieren und hat sie neu gestartet. Dann war überhaupt das Chaos perfekt.
Okay.
Es war, darum bin ich jetzt positiv überrascht, dass es funktioniert.
Oh, okay. Aber ich glaube, also ich weiß jetzt nicht, ich dachte, wir wären mehrere Leute, aber ich keine Ahnung, wie das funktioniert. Ich glaube, vielleicht können wir uns einfach vorstellen zuerst und dann vielleicht ein bisschen anfangen mit irgendwelchen Themen. Ich nehme an, du hast jetzt auch nichts Spezifisches vorbereitet an
Na,
Fragen oder Themen.
also es war, mein
Okay.
Verständnis war das, dass wir da jetzt jemanden im Raum dabei haben, äh, die sozusagen von uns etwas nähere Informationen bekommen, was wir jeweils vertreten. Sagt sie F8 oder F8?
Also unsere Firma,
Ja,
F10, F10.
18. Okay, dann haben sie es nämlich an der falsch reingeschrieben. Das steht in dem Excel steht der F8 drinnen.
Was? Okay. Nee, also, okay. Wir können ja ein bisschen improvisieren, die nächste halbe Stunde, in der Hoffnung, dass vielleicht das Publikum noch ein paar Fragen stellt. Und also ich weiß ja einigermaßen, was ihr macht. Ich hatte auch schon mit Kollegen von euch zu tun in Wien
Mhm.
von Raiffeisen International
Mhm.
und kenne auch Startups, die mit euch arbeiten. Und ja, vielleicht können wir einfach ein bisschen, also ich glaube, wir kommen da schon ein paar Fragen in den Sinn und dann vielleicht hat das Publikum auch noch ein paar Fragen.
Ja,
Schauen wir mal.
sollen wir es auf Englisch machen oder auf Deutsch? Weil ich vermute.
Ich denke auf Englisch, weil die
Ja,
Idee wäre ja auch noch, dass sich ein paar Startups zuschalten.
alright.
Genau.
Gut, gut. But you are
Good, then maybe we will.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Up to you. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to suggest maybe we'll wait 2-3 minutes until more people join, but we can also start. I mean,
All right.
I think you can join anytime.
But F10 is the accelerator program that is at close to Hartbrücke, right? The offices, or am I mistaken?
Exactly.
All right. So
Yeah.
you
It's quite close there. Yeah. Maybe I mean I can maybe start to give you and everybody who's listening in a little bit of background about the F10, and then maybe afterwards we can also learn a bit more about Raiffeisen International. So F10 was born 5 years ago out of the Swiss Stock Exchange called SIX. And SIX is not just the Swiss Stock Exchange. SIX is also basically the infrastructure backbone of the financial industry in Switzerland, right? So they have a big interest to work with new technologies and so on. So 5 years ago, when the world when Fintech was not yet such a heavy word, right? They started this what they called Fintech Accelerator. And since SIX has around 200 banks and insurances as their clients, they said, let's open the platform. Let's not do this just for the stock exchange, but have other banks and insurances join in. So today, 5 years later, we are now 12 corporate partners, as we call them, which are mainly Swiss banks, but also some international insurances like Generali, for example, or House of Insurtech, who is also here at the conference. And at the end of the day, it's about providing value to both the startups and, of course, all these corporate partners that we have by trying to foster collaboration. So how do we do this? We have an early stage incubation program that focuses on fintech company, but also deep tech companies. Anybody, as long as you provide a value for the financial industry, you can apply for the F10 with a prototype. and you're not on the market yet, but within 6 months, we're trying to get you a first client or a proof of concept at least, or a pilot project, or trying to make you fundraising ready, right? So that you can also raise money and grow. And then of course, we also help you with your product so that you can really launch the product, and also help with being enterprise ready. Because as you probably know, Christian, it's sometimes not so easy to integrate with bigger banks as a startup. So we help with this. And then on the other side, we also have a later stage startup program, acceleration program that focuses on scale-ups. So, startups in the growth phase. And we scout internationally. So we basically take startups from all over the country. We have, however, now launched an F10 Singapore to cover the Asian market, because sometimes that doesn't work so well if Asian startups come to Switzerland, especially at the early stage. So we are now offering something to our partners, which are again, mainly Swiss companies, but also Asian companies that we have as partners in Singapore. Singapore, obvious choice because it's the Fintech hub in Asia. And just 2 weeks ago, we also launched an F10 Spain. That came about because of good connections from SIX, the Swiss Stock Exchange, with the Spanish Stock Exchange. They actually acquired the Spanish Stock Exchange. So SIX promised to bring some innovation to Spain also. And now we have F10 also in Madrid and Barcelona, offering the same with the Spanish partners, and also trying to basically use Spain as a gateway in fintech for the Latin American market. So that's basically a nutshell of F10. And yeah, in Zurich, we are located at near the Hartbrücke. Exactly.
Right.
So maybe over to you, Christian. What is Raiffeisen International?
If I do not manage to crash my computer again, I have a few slides prepared. I think they might help better understanding what we are doing. I'm not sure, do you see those? Or
yeah.
Perfect. All right. So here I'm a representative of Raiffeisen International. So to avoid any confusion, Raiffeisen International is headquartered in Vienna, Austria, but actually sees its major area of operation is all of CEE. So except of our large corporate client base, all of our clients, retail, corporate, and institutional, are somewhere in between the large markets of Russia, up until down to the smaller markets on the Balkans, just to mention one of them, Albania, for instance. As such, we are serving for the moment 13 countries that are served locally by their own local universal banks. We have around 2,000 business outlets across all of these countries, that which might be surprising if you look just on the Austrian market. This is actually a quite low number, but these 2,000 business outlets serve around roughly, for the moment, 17 million customers on the retail side, and actually the largest portion of the big corporate customers from Western Europe that needed to be accompanied into the CEE count among our valued corporate customers. So which brings me actually to our Elevator Lab. Elevator Lab is a program that we started roughly 4 years ago. And it developed out of a bigger attempt to organize our innovation vehicles a bit. And we said very close to our innovation efforts was to also disrupt more or less our core business. So we were looking for startups and fintechs who could help us doing so. And out of that, rather unintentionally, we developed the Elevator Lab. The Elevator Lab is a program that is run all across our countries, and it can be seen as a kind of a fintech accelerator program. Even though it started or still is a fintech accelerator program, we are continuously opening our focus, and actually now including much more and more startups. So not only fintech related startups, as we also want to team up and co-innovate with our own corporate clients. But back to the Elevator Lab, I think the major characteristics to be summarized are We have meanwhile reached a considerable brand and market reputation in our core markets. So for the moment, given our coverage, we're the largest corporate fintech program in CE. What we offer is an equity-free program, meaning that together with our internal business lines, or also our local banks, we define focus areas where we believe that we should develop our banks further. And then we invite fintechs to pitch their products and services to that program. What makes us a bit outstanding is that we have a dedicated POC fund for that. So once we have selected a fintech or even more of them, we run in a dedicated setup together with our interns and the fintech representatives a POC phase of roughly 6 months. And we fund this out of a POC fund. So we do not take equity, but we more or less pay for building up something, a proof of concept for our bank. In addition, this is split into 3 main pillars. Let's call it that way. We have a global program that is run out of Vienna. So this is aiming at establishing partnerships with global fintechs, and we've seen that the reach is really there. So we had applications over the past few rounds from all over the world, Brazil, Israel as well, of course, quite a lot actually when it came to advanced analytics. And here we are looking for later stage fintechs, meaning that we are looking at those who already have at least a minimum marketable product available that we look into integrating first here in head office, but always with a view on the scalability onto our markets. What does this mean? That actually with cooperating with the startup, we offer an entry point into the group, meaning access to all the customers in our 13 countries, plus access to all of our banks in these 13 countries. In addition to that, we run local programs that should cater to the needs of our local banks. As you might be aware, that given the overview that I've shown, we have a quite heterogeneous market landscape to cover. We have a lot of advanced, very advanced countries. For instance, when it comes to banking, our Slovakian subsidiary Data Bank continuously is awarded as best digital bank in Europe. Whereas we have other less advanced countries, and as such, we want to have a local program that can cater specifically to their local needs. And these countries are supported by us, but actually run locally by each separate bank. And last and third one is the Elevator Lab Bootcamp, where we here will deliberately ask or look for early stage startups. And we more or less try to educate and cooperate, team up with them to push their cause, to help them in building an MVP together with our local experts. That this is not just a marketing slide. Actually, we've run already through 4 batches of the program. With a total of 10 initiatives. We have actually run very extensively through a base of roughly 1,000 fintechs over the last 3 years. And most importantly, I think, for all of our listeners would be that we have actually really delivered on more than 20 POCs across the group. In addition to that, I believe it might be of interest that these POCs have been run, but are then, as said, scaled to our countries as much as possible. And last, and this was it actually for all of my slides. I try to get back to my overview. And in addition to that, we have our Elevator Ventures, which is a venture capital vehicle that is actually at the very end of the program, not necessarily an integral part, but if we decide that we like the corporation so much, we also think, of course, taking about an investment and an equity stake, and this is run out of the Elevator Ventures. So basically, very shortly, that's about our approach here. We invite for the upcoming rounds, which will start early next year, of course, fintechs and startups from all around the world. Again, as I'm talking about fintechs, this is not limited to fintechs solely, but if it's close or at least near to banking, it would be very helpful.
Very interesting. So also with like F10, you could looking at the tech companies that have a value proposition for banks and the financial industry. Cool. I think Tal had a question in the chat. What about digital asset startups? Is that a fit for Elevator Lab?
Definitely. If you're talking about, I start from the other way around. We have in the last year, we had a special focus area that was actually wealth management, but we also looked into crossing that with emerging technologies. And one of the resulting startups that we ended up incorporating with was Billon. And with Billon, we are now building, and this has just been in the news again, our RBI coin, which is a Euro-backed stable coin. And we're looking very much forward that extending that. So digital assets is definitely something we look into. I think another thing which is not from the Elevator Lab, but might be of interest, we just announced our cooperation with the Pantus project, which is a research project from Bitpanda, one of the biggest crypto exchanges in Europe. And the Pantus project is aiming at creating interoperability between different chain solutions so that we can, for instance, move a BTC to an Ethereum chain, just to make up any example here. So what I'm saying with that is that we are looking, of course, into the tokenization, but we're also looking into any kind of startups that can help us on the infrastructure side, but also when it comes to fulfilling legal and compliance obligations.
Cool. Maybe I can add digital assets in a big topic, I guess, Switzerland anyway, with the whole blockchain, track record. And at F10, we obviously have SIX as a partner, who's the, as mentioned, the Swiss Stock Exchange, which is currently building the largest digital stock exchange in the world. It's called SDX. It's a quite ambitious project, very complicated project. It's not live fully yet, but of course, the idea is that for the first time, you are able to basically trade digital assets. And even though crypto, as one use case, has not really, gained a lot of traction with the traditional banks in Switzerland, there is a couple of banks and also some of the members of F10 that are now very concretely looking into tokenizing assets and basically creating a digital assets offer for their clients. So as well as, like Christian mentioned, in the wealth management space, we have one of the largest wealth managers here in Switzerland, also as a member of the F10. They are certainly looking into that. And then there's retail banks that are also now, basically starting to create an offer and very much are interested to work with ventures that have an offering along the digital assets value chain. So that's a pretty big topic. I think generally in the, I guess Austria is a bit the same case, right? Not so huge in consumer markets. Switzerland, I think, is the same, although you guys obviously do have other markets that are much more consumer driven. Can you, maybe as a question to keep the conversation going, Christian, I would be wondering about the focus of B2B versus B2C versus maybe B2B2C. What do you see as interesting cases in your case? Maybe also talking a little bit about the different markets you cover.
Right. Thanks for that question. That actually drives us recently very much. What we currently see is out of our cooperation with our own corporate clients that more and more approach us also in building, let's say, a co-innovation and a cross-industry cooperation approach, that our business models shift more and more from a into a B2B2C and a B2B2B model. And interesting for us is that the second B is not the traditional corporate, but rather it's developers, it's fintechs, it's corporates, it's consortia, it's whoever you name. And all of them have one thing in common: they do not necessarily approach us because of our bank-client relationship, but because of the technology partnership. And as such, we are working a lot on topics like marketplaces, be it in the then again in the B2B area, so SME marketplaces, for instance, but also when it comes to reuniting customers around a kind of a centralized offer, B2C, so using our own mobile channels in integrating additional offers that go beyond banking. In addition, I think because I just mentioned this B2B2X model, this is exactly the reason why we want to move beyond fintech only. We want to look into other startups. I'll just give you one example. We are very much looking now into IoT and sensorics robotics, and in connection to that, to pay-per-use use cases. And as such, of course, cooperation partners that can help us in jointly building solutions in, let's say, in agro business, for instance, where we together define a pay-per-use case for any kind of agro machinery, for instance. These are the things that we are very keen on working on for the moment.
Cool. Yeah, likewise, we also saw some to us in either the early stage or even in the scale-up phase that either had a B2C offering and they were interested to, head it into B2B2C. For example, one example would be Yova.ch, which is one of the largest robo-advisors, consumer-facing robo-advisors here in Switzerland, focused on sustainable investment. So everybody who cares about sustainability and a few thousand francs left and doesn't want them to be lying around on the savings account can basically, with a sustainable footprint, what we would call gender lens investing. So basically gender friendly companies, right? You can invest in, which is also the SGE, you can invest in those. And so the startup called Yova, they have, gathered a quite good track record. Consumers invest their money in it, and they have now a completely different stand when it comes to approaching Swiss or even European banks to creating white label solutions. So that would be the B2B2C case for them, right? So that's usually also an advice that we give startups. If you're thinking of B2B2C, try to maybe go into B2C first, if it makes sense, right? It's a different model, yes, but banks are still a bit reluctant when it comes to working with a startup who has no clients and no track record whatsoever. So it can sometimes help if you have consumer clients or consumer customers, right? Basically, then to say, this is, we've proven our model, we've proven our concept, and we are now basically partnering up with, for example, a bank or an insurance company, and we're white labeling our solution, and we headed into that B2B2C space. So that's usually a good something that can help a lot. So Christian, what about open banking? I saw you guys also have a sandbox, like we also do offer an API sandbox, trying to provide APIs from corporates, from banks, from insurances to test, and then have fintechs to test against these APIs to kind of trying out prototypes and so on. Although I figured, especially in Europe, the industry is quite reluctant, and we're struggling a little bit to get more APIs on the ground. So how is this discussion on?
All right, you're absolutely correct. If you look into Asia, for instance, DBS, which has an abundance of different APIs already available, Europe is more or less really reluctant. On the other hand, what we see as a major driver for openness is now the PSD2, which initially, so the Payment Services Directive 2, for those who might not be aware. And even though banks were, let's say, very reluctant at the very beginning, and saw it as another compliance necessity to adhere to, we have now embraced that concept of digital, and we said we want to go far beyond PSD2. PSD2, for those who do not know that regulation, is offering access to licensed third-party providers to transactional data from clients as soon as they give their consent, and which takes or puts European banks in, let's say, very competitive situation. And we decided we want to go beyond that. We want to be open, as we believe that openness is the key to this co-innovation and cooperation concept. And we also believe that, because you mentioned the marketplace, that a marketplace is a very good connection point to this new piece that I mentioned before. Here in that case, namely developers, but also business persons who can better understand of what APIs do we offer and what services they can build on top of that. So it's about, of course, positioning RBI in third-party ecosystems, but I'm also very much looking into integrating third-party services via these APIs into RBI Group. And I think this is a very special offer to all of the startups out here. Just open up our API marketplace at pardon me, api.rbinternational.com, and here you can find all of the necessary information to join us, discuss with our experts, and play around in the sandboxes. We very much believe that this is a good ground for cooperation. But actually, what are your experiences in F10 and your startups, and how do they leverage these emerging ecosystems with banks?
Yeah, so what we're trying is to hunt a little bit the banks and organizations that do provide, like RBI, for example, also these kind of marketplaces, and have a little bit of an offering for startups. And it's already a bit tricky because we've visited many banks, and the point is that obviously a sandbox environment, that's kind of easy to build, and it's also easy to provide, but startups are obviously not willing to spend a lot of time on an API that is in a sandbox, which is then not in production, right? Which, you know, cannot really be accessed in real life. And I think Switzerland is and Europe in general, and our partners are still a bit you know, struggling with this. What we've seen with, you know, one of our main partners, Six, which is the backbone, as I mentioned, of the financial infrastructure in Switzerland. They are now trying to fill that role when they basically pool these banks that are and all other use cases, and they're trying to provide API third parties, and particularly also fintechs from various banks on the Six platform. And what we, the F10, basically our job is to provide these APIs then in the sandbox. So we are the playground, where Six is the big brother, where, you know, you can go live in production. Obviously, you have to win a certificate and you have to, you know, subscribe. And there's still a lot of security concerns, and it's not really open API like you would know from companies like Facebook or, you know, the open API world as we know from other industries. It's not exactly the case in finance. You would still have to go through a due diligence, but at least we're trying at the F10 with our sandbox, we're at least trying to ease the stepping stone, right? So the first step into, you know, basically also becoming aware what kind of API can be tried out, and also basically show something which you then later on can also use to go through the due diligence when it actually is getting to production. So my belief is that it doesn't really make sense that every bank does their own thing, especially not in small countries like Switzerland, and also not in Europe per se, but that they should somehow, you know, come together. And I hope that there's going to be more marketplaces and more ecosystems arising when, and then I'm speaking from the fintech perspective, obviously, right, where I can have easy access to those APIs. Because what makes a scalable solution in a fintech context is obviously if I can deploy my solution to as many financial industry partners, clients as possible, which is anyway difficult enough, because if I, for example, am a fintech and my solution is one for banks, is anyway going to be difficult because every bank has, their own infrastructure. Every bank has maybe different regulatory hurdles that I need to take. So to make such a product scalable is harder than maybe in other industries. And if I have a place in a marketplace or an ecosystem where I can at least integrate with many more clients, even though I have to go through due diligence, I think that would really, really help to truly accelerate the growth of fintech. Anywhere in the world, really. So it's cool that you at RBI have this initiative, and I hope that you have a full pipeline also of fintechs that work with your platform.
We invite whoever is interested, but I fully agree with you that, for instance, just making this for our Austrian markets available wouldn't be any big attractivity. Let's put it that way. This is why we have taken the path that we decided we build a group-wide API marketplace. So we take care about all these regulatory and legal issues that we have in the different markets. And you, as a fintech or startup, you only connect to this group API, and we in the background actually connect you locally to our banks, and we take care of the rest. I think this is very much in line what you've just suggested or described, what F10 is doing for the Swiss ecosystem, right?
Yeah, mainly the Swiss ecosystem. We also provided a PSD2 API just to start with, because we don't have PSD2 in Switzerland. But we're open, right? So we're open to have any API, to have any company basically be represented on our sandbox. It's quite quick and dirty. You get an API key and you can basically start as a fintech. And of course, we like to believe the more the merrier. So now, especially since we're also expanding to Spain and to the Asian market, we're super open to just become a little bit like a curated platform and a one-stop shop for testing against financial APIs. That would be the vision. So if anybody knows anybody with a cool API we can put on our sandbox, we're open.
Also definitely team up.
And I think we're running out of time. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say we should also definitely meet up, the two of us, actually afterwards.
Please do so. And anybody in the audience, I think we're out of time. I will certainly be around on B2B, B2Match later on. I can also put in my email address if anybody has more questions around F10. Maybe Christian you can do the same, and then definitely. I think we'll see each other around.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cool. Nice talking to you.
Ciao.
Bye, everybody.